there. I'm going to pilot a new series I would like to try to implement. I suspect it will not be frequent nor regular, but hopefully it will be informative and interesting. And I'm calling it GeoJesser Explains. I was originally going to make this a vlog post, but then I decided I wanted it to be more of a broad audience, and then I decided it isn't really a vlog, it's more of a educational tool or teaching moment. So instead of limiting the audience, I thought I would release this in to the regular channel for public consumption and just plug my Patreon while I'm here. You get access to bonus videos, and if you spring for the Explorer tier, you do get vlogs where I do just sort of talk about what's on my mind. And it's a bit both extemporaneous and train of thought, and a bit off the cuff. I did plan this out a little bit more, but it will be largely extemporaneous. Hopefully I will manage to keep myself on topic, and this will be a consumable length video. So what I thought I would do with this series is talk about a subject in which I am well versed, and that may be directly or indirectly related to geography. I'm supposed to be a geography-themed channel, but see, I am not a geographer. I have 3 degrees. I have a bachelor's degree in the study of religion. I have a master's degree in creative writing and another master's degree in accountancy, and I am going to go off and be an accountant soon. I have been Jewish my whole life and studied religion in college, as I said, and so I am pretty well versed in both the study of religion and religious practice and what makes a religion. And I've read the Bible, Christian and Jewish Bibles, and some of the Apocrypha. So I feel like I'm in a position where I can say I maybe am not, I'm not a rabbi, I'm not like a PhD scholar on this, but I know enough to give some basics to people who maybe haven't had the exposure to Jewish people or to other subjects, or maybe they have, but they'd like to hear about it in a different way. And I am justifying this going on a geography channel because if you look up what geography means, the study of the physical features of the Earth and its atmosphere, and of human activity as it affects and is affected by these, including the distribution of populations and resources, land use, and industries. In other words, it's all connected. Geography touches on history, politics, culture, religion, language, ethnicity, migration, agriculture, all of it. It's all influenced by the geography of the region in which humans lived. And I've always been a person that likes to know a little bit about a lot of things. And so that really appeals to me as sort of this way of bringing in all sorts of different subjects and topics that may or may not be, directly related to, what's on a map, or, where certain islands are in the Pacific Ocean. As I briefly foreshadowed, probably a lot of these will be on various subjects related to American Judaism, because that is something I am very familiar with, both from my own experience and from my education. And I thought I would start it now because we are in a season in which Jews are slightly more visible than at other times of year. And I wanted to kind of get into that. So I'm going to start with some basics. What is a Jew? Who is a Jew? What makes a Jewish person a Jewish person? Where did we come from, right? Who are these people? Jews are both a religion and an ethnicity, but also not. It's kind of complicated. It's a religion, it's a cultural background, it's a set of traditions, and it's an ethnicity in that Judaism is passed down through parental lineage and not through, it's not a religion you just decide to be. So like if you want to be a Christian, you basically say, I'm a Christian, I believe in Jesus Christ, I'm a Christian now. It's not quite that simple if you want to become a Jew, because Judaism, as I said, it's not just a religion. It is a series of practices and traditions and holidays and customs and a collection of foods and songs and prayers with an authority, and it's based on a holy book. And all of those things make it a religion and a culture. But it's also, as I said, you are Jewish either because you have a Jewish parent. More traditional Jewish groups it has to be from your mother. Your mother has to be Jewish for you to be Jewish. Some of the more sort of liberal branches of Judaism allow patrilineal descent, meaning if your father was Jewish, you are Jewish as well. Or if you converted through a process guided by a rabbi, which is a long and involved process of education and living as a Jew, but not being counted among the Jewish people until you go through the conversion ritual, which is just, it's not anything really like esoteric or anything, but there is a ritual involved. And then you're Jewish, and then your children can be Jewish. But you can be Jewish without practicing any of the religious traditions. You can be Jewish and atheist. Judaism came out of the Middle East, specifically the region now known as Israel and Palestine. I think about 3,000 years ago, people called the Israelites or the Hebrews came in and eradicated the Canaanites, the people that lived there, conquered them, took over the land. Hey, I didn't say it was all sunshine and rainbows. And settled there and established a kingdom called Judea, which then fell into the hands of various conquering empires over the years, the last of which was the Roman Empire. Some were more permissive of Jewish practice than others. Some actively outlawed it. Others loved it. So there were periods of exile. There were periods where practicing Judaism was suppressed, and other times where it flourished. It just depended who was in charge and their attitude at the time. The Romans, the people of Judea, when the Romans controlled the area, they didn't want the Romans to control them anymore, and they tried to rebel, and it did not go well. This was in 70 CE, so almost 2,000 years ago. They lost, and the Romans destroyed the temple, which was the holy site where all of religious practice centered around. And it had been there for hundreds and hundreds of years, this site, this temple. They destroyed it, and they exiled the Jews from that region, and the Jews spread out across the world from there, and they went into Europe, they went into the Middle East, they went down into North Africa, and over the hundreds of years that followed, spread out all over, literally all over the world. There were Jews on Columbus's ships when he left Spain in 1492, because Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand of Spain kicked the Jews out of Spain in 1492. That was the same time that they granted Columbus their royal patronage or whatever of him going out to find whatever it is he thought he would find, and there were Jews on his ship because they were trying to leave. So there have been Jewish settlements and inhabitants of the Americas for several hundred years as well. Certainly, there are Jewish communities in Mexico and in Argentina that have been there for, I think the oldest synagogue in the Americas is in Argentina, if I'm not mistaken. So over time, because of geographical separations, even though these people started out with a common practice, common set of laws, common set of cultural and traditional backgrounds, as they spread out, obviously they developed in parallel, and there was certainly communication between the groups, but there were definitely sort of two main groups, the Sephardim, which were the Jews that were kicked out of Spain and ended up going in around North Africa, up into the Middle East, and down over into the Americas. And then there were the Ashkenazi Jews. These are the ones that lived in Eastern and Central Europe. And they developed some different rules, some different traditions, but there's a lot of crossover. I mean, it's not two completely different religions. It's just some different cuisine and some different prayers and some different melodies and a few different interpretations of the law. But overall, it's not like a whole different thing. Over the centuries, Jews were persecuted by various governments. They were kicked out of England in the 13th century. They were kicked out of Spain and Portugal at the end of the 15th century. They were subjected to pogroms and other kinds of violence in Eastern Europe, Russia, Poland, the Baltic states, and generally lived more peacefully in the Muslim-held lands. Not always, but generally. And so that's why a lot of Jews fled from Spain and Portugal into the Muslim lands, because they were granted the right to live peacefully there. And then, of course, we get World War II, where something like 90% of Europe's Jewish population was completely eliminated. It was absolutely an act of genocide. It was actively stated to be an act of genocide. The word genocide maybe wasn't used, but that was the stated goal. And so what you were left with was an almost total depopulation of the Jewish communities of Europe, but we still had Jews who had emigrated to the United States and other parts of the Americas before and during World War II. And there are Jews in other places. There have always been Jews in what is now Israel and Palestine as well. They were expelled from most of the Middle Eastern countries, except for Israel and Palestine, mostly in the 20th century. And so the Jews of the world today are mostly concentrated in the United States and Israel, with a smattering in other countries, a few thousand, tens of thousands. In the United States and Israel have about 7 million each. And that's the bulk of the Jewish population of the world now. So that's kind of, geographically speaking, who are Jews. And of course, as the Jewish people moved into different regions, they took on certain customs. They took on the look, the dress, the languages of the people amongst whom they lived. And so you have Asian Jews, and you have Black Jews, and you have, more Mediterranean looking Jews, and you have Russian looking Jews like me. It all just depends where your heritage was, where your family came from in more recent years. Because even though Judaism is an ethnicity, it's also not, and it's also not a race, which is a whole other thing. And so, you end up with the effects of the diaspora on the way people look and speak and dress, in addition to just where they live. After, of course, World War II, after the Holocaust, in 1948 was the establishment of the State of Israel as a Jewish homeland. I'm not getting into any controversies. I'm just saying that's where things are right now. That's important because the only place where Jews are a majority of the population is Israel. Everywhere else, Jews are an extreme minority. I just mentioned 7 million in Israel, 7 million in the United States, and a smattering across the rest of the world. There are less than 15 million Jews in the entire world, and apparently the world just ticked over 8 billion people. So let's do that math real quick, shall we? We have, we'll be generous, we'll call it 15 million. Divided by 8 billion. I'm knocking off some zeros. We are less than 0.2% of the world population. So not a lot of us. And that's important because it has bearing on what I'm going to talk about next, which is, here's my pithy title: what is Hanukkah and why it isn't the Jewish Christmas? That's my main topic. So I felt like I needed to lay down the foundation so that I could start talking about this without having to go back and explain things. Going forward, hopefully people will have watched this one and I won't have to go through all of the background again. So what we find nowadays, especially in the United States, but I think in a lot of other Western Christian-dominated countries, is around this time of year, you get the Merry Christmas, War on Christmas. You can't say Merry Christmas, you have to say Happy Holidays, because there are other people that celebrate other holidays, or people who don't celebrate Christmas, and blah, 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 blah. And what ends up happening is you have, the Christmas tree, and, the city puts up a Christmas tree, and the doctor's office decorates for Christmas, and the school puts on a Christmas pageant, and just everywhere you look, it's Christmas, 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 Christmas. Christmas is all around me. Right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's lovely. It's beautiful. It's a lovely time of year. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it's kind of the environment we find ourselves in. And then you'll look, and off to the side, there'll be like a menorah in the window, or there'll be like a little Happy Hanukkah dreidel hanging on the wall, or they'll have the kids sing a Hanukkah song in addition to the Christmas carols, as if saying, oh yeah, you've got your holiday now too. We'll acknowledge that. And there's nothing wrong with acknowledging it. But what ends up happening is people consider Hanukkah to be the Jewish Christmas because, hey, you've got a holiday around this time, you give presents, cool, enjoy your holiday. Like, yeah, thank you, I will enjoy my holiday. But Hanukkah has absolutely no relationship to Christmas. It is not analogous to Christmas. It is not in any way related to Christmas. And so I wanted to talk about what Hanukkah actually is and its meaning and how it is celebrated, and kind of how it came to be this, you know, Jewish Christmas that it is not. So let's start with the story of Hanukkah, and this is adapted from the Chabad.org retelling, which I will link in the description. It went into a fair amount of the history, and I am condensing it a lot, so I encourage you to go read it. It's actually really, really good overview of kind of what was going on in the area at the time. We're talking about 175 BCE, so 2nd century BCE, when the region of Judea was under the control of the Seleucid Empire, also called the Assyrians. The emperor at the time was Antiochus III, and he liked the Jews. He protected them. He allowed religious practice. Everything was hunky-dory as things can be. But there were tensions within the Jewish community between Hellenistic Jews who wanted to be like the Greeks. They wanted to worship the Greek gods. They wanted to dress like Greeks and eat like Greeks. And the ones who wanted to remain other and not assimilate and to continue Jewish practice and not worship Greek gods and be like Greeks. Okay, so you have the same story that you have all through history. You've got people who want to assimilate and be part of the majority culture, and you've got people who want to make sure they maintain their separateness. Stuff happened, yada, yada, yada. Antiochus III dies. He is eventually succeeded by Antiochus IV, and Antiochus IV did not like the Jews, and he outlawed Jewish practice. Jews weren't allowed to practice circumcision. They weren't allowed to observe the Sabbath. They weren't allowed to really engage in any Jewish practices of studying their religious books and things like that. And many were forced to eat pork and things like that. And on top of that, they installed a Hellenistic Jew as a priest in the temple, who then allowed sacrifices to Zeus in the Holy Temple, which obviously defiled it and made it unsuitable for Jewish practice because it was not used for that at the time. This leads to violence. It leads to basically a civil war / rebellion, led by a man named Matthias and his sons. One son's name is Judah Maccabee. That name may be familiar. Maccabee means hammer. He was Judah the Hammer, and they led a revolt, and they won, and they retook the temple, and
there was much rejoicing.
So then they had to clean the temple and make it suitable for use again. And when that was done, they rededicated it. And the word Hannukah literally means rededication or dedication. So it's the celebration of the rededication of the Holy Temple after it was retaken from the Hellenistic Jews and the Assyrians, which is fine. That's cool. It's a story of triumph over an oppressive regime. We have a lot of those. Part of the Hanukkah story that is almost certainly apocryphal and invented, that's all history, that all happened, is the miracle that was attached to this celebration to make it from God as opposed to just, some guy managed to win a war. And that is the miracle of Hanukkah, which is that part of the rededication of the temple was the relighting of the light, of the eternal light, the light that was supposed to be lit all the time. It's the menorah, which is a 7-branched candelabra, and it was lit using olive oil. And the olive oil had to be pure and sanctified and everything else in order to be used in the temple. And they didn't have enough. Most of the olive oil stores that were there had been desecrated. So they found one little jar that was usable, but they figured it wasn't enough to last even a whole day. And it was going to take 8 days to get fresh oil brought in from where it was being made. And so they were like, well, we got to do something. So they lit the menorah with the oil that they had, and it miraculously lasted. The flame lasted until the new oil could arrive. That's the story. That's the miracle of Hanukkah that is celebrated by the lighting of the colloquially called the menorah. Actually, it's called a Chanukiah because it has 9 branches. The menorah has 7. So that's like the really short version of the story of Hanukkah. And it came to be a celebration, and it is held in the winter. And basically, how is Hanukkah celebrated? You light a candle every night, one for each night of the holiday. You light 1 candle the first night, you light 2 candles the second night, 3 candles the third night, etc., until you've got all 8 lit. That's it. We're supposed to eat, to commemorate the miracle of the oil, we're supposed to eat foods that are fried in oil. So that leads to the traditional Hanukkah foods of things like latkes, which are potato pancakes, and donuts. So that's great. I mean, Hanukkah is a really fun, easy holiday. It's enjoyable. It's light, and heck, you're supposed to light candles and eat fried food. Like that's, and generally there's some rules about when you're supposed to light these candles. The candles are supposed to last for at least half an hour. You're supposed to let them go out on their own. You're not supposed to blow them out. And during the time that they're burning, is the time when you're supposed to kind of like have family time, have celebrations, eat your dinner, play games, sing songs, that kind of thing. It's supposed to be like taking that moment in time to celebrate. So, how in the world did this holiday that has its own set of traditions come to be put up beside Christmas as like another holiday, another winter holiday? Because it is another winter holiday, but it's not Christmas. I'm going to keep drilling that point. Well, Hanukkah falls in December on the Gregorian calendar. The Jewish calendar is a lunar cycle with typically 12 months. It's very similar to the Muslim calendar, the Asian calendar. It follows the moon cycles. Months are 29 or 30 days. There are 12 of them, except when there are 13. And the reason for that is that the lunar cycle with 12 months is 11 days short of the solar cycle. And so what ends up happening is you have a holiday that's meant to be celebrated in the spring. So you celebrate it, say, April 15th, and then next year it falls on April 4th, and then the next year it falls on March. I'm making myself do quick math in my head here, like 26th or whatever. Anyway, it keeps getting earlier in the year. And suddenly you've got this spring holiday that's being celebrated in January, and that doesn't make sense. So what this was done in ancient times. They figured all this stuff out. They were like, well, we need to make sure to get the calendar to realign with the sun so that the holidays, a harvest holiday needs to fall in the fall during harvest, not in the winter when there's nothing to harvest anymore. And so they add a month, a full month, a 13th month into the calendar every several years. It ends up being 7 times in a 19-year cycle. You add this 13th month to realign the calendar. And so what ends up happening is, even though the holiday falls on the same date on the Jewish calendar every year, that date moves around on the solar calendar. And that's why it's like, oh, when is Hanukkah this year? I don't know. Hanukkah is always on the 25th day of the 9th month of the calendar. That month is called Kislev, and it's 8 days long, so it runs into the next month called Tevet. And that's always the same on the Jewish calendar. And that time, that 8-day period, typically falls in December on the Gregorian calendar. Sometimes it's quite late in December and overlaps with Christmas. Sometimes it's earlier in December. We did have one time where Hanukkah started on Thanksgiving weekend, but that is extremely rare for it to come before December 1st. So that's why it appears to move around. But it is a December holiday in the sense that that is when it ends up happening. Now, Christmas and Easter are like the 2 biggest holidays on the Christian calendar typically. Those are the days when, even less practicing Christians don't usually go to church. Those are the holidays that basically everybody celebrates, right? Hanukkah is not that for Jews. The holidays that are they call them, I think, submarine Jews. They surface twice a year. That's the New Year, which is typically in September. There's 2 days of the New Year celebration, and then 10 days later, there's the Day of Atonement. Those are the days that your non-practicing Jews will show up to synagogue. So that would be sort of the analogous in terms of importance of the holiday on the calendar. There are 3 other holidays that are super important and have all sorts of rituals and lifestyle changes and all sorts of things that you need to do to celebrate these holidays. And then there are 2 holidays that are not that. One is called Purim, comes in the spring, a month before Passover. One is called Hanukkah. So the difference between Hanukkah and Purim and the other holidays that I glossed over is that those other holidays are actually described in the 5 books of Moses, the Torah. It says when they need to be celebrated, the 15th day of the first month or the first day of the 7th month or whatever. And what you're supposed to do is actually written out, bring 2 sheep and 3 pigeons, and, you are not to perform any work that day and that sort of thing. And so given directly by God. If you believe that the Torah comes from God, then it's like God told us to celebrate these holidays and he told us how to do it. Hannukah and Purim are not in the Torah. They come from different books of the Bible. Hannukah actually is not in the Jewish Bible at all, but it can be found in the Christian Bible or the Apocrypha in the books of the Maccabees, specifically 1st and 2nd Maccabees. So I have read that. It's kind of cool. But it's not in the Jewish Bible at all. The story of Purim is in the Jewish Bible. It's the book of Esther. But neither one is considered to have been dictated by God. They were developed by the religious authorities of the time as a way of commemorating these events. So they don't have the cachet that a holiday that came directly from God would have. And so Hannukah in the past was not it wasn't a major holiday. You didn't stop everything to celebrate Hannukah. You lit your candle at night and you maybe played a game of dreidel, which is essentially a dice game of chance with a 4-sided top. You maybe there was a tradition of giving Hannukah gelt, which is money, to give each other money or give your children money. And of course have a meal, but otherwise you kind of went about your day as usual. There wasn't any major other things to do for Hannukah. But as I mentioned, now that at least half the world's population of Jews live in a majority Christian world, majority Christian countries, one way that it became possible to be visible was to kind of be like, hey, we don't celebrate Christmas. We have this other holiday that we celebrate right now that's also fun. And then, of course, you've got your kid in public school and there's Christmas everywhere and their friends are all talking about the presents that they got and the things that, Santa's going to bring them. And your kid is jealous. And so you say that we'll give you presents on Hannukah. That's fine. Hannukah is a gift-giving holiday because you're supposed to give money. We'll give you presents. And so it turned into, and I'm not criticizing, this is just the development. The things develop based on where you live, the cultures amongst whom you live. And so Hannukah turned into a gift-giving holiday that survives parallel to Christmas and is acknowledged during Christmas time as like, oh yeah, you've got other people celebrating other things. The Jews got that other holiday. So Hannukah, as you can see, has absolutely nothing to do with Christmas. It doesn't have anything in common. It's not even a solstice celebration. Like it doesn't even have the sort of roots of some other holidays like Passover and Easter have some similarities because they're both spring holidays. But there's nothing common in where Hannukah came from and where Christmas came from, whether you consider the religious roots or the cultural roots of it. There's one thing. I will add a caveat. There is one thing that most winter holidays have in common, and that is light. The idea that, we have these long nights, it's dark this time of year, and we want to bring light. So in that sense, that is what makes it a winter holiday, is because of the light. But the fact that it's in the winter is coincidental because that's just when it happened. So Hannukah is Hannukah. It is what it is. It is celebrated by Jews. It has been embraced as a time when Jews get to be visible more than in other times of year. And it's fun. And it's, like I said, a fairly easy holiday to observe. So it has become important culturally, even if it isn't important religiously. So I come at this from the perspective of somebody who has grown up in a majority Christian country as a varying practice Jew, and as sometimes the token Jew in a classroom. And, you're putting on a holiday concert or something, and we're going to throw in, the dreidel song or some other Hannukah song as to be inclusive. And I feel like it's great that you want to be inclusive, but you still feel excluded when most of what's going on is not yours, right? And so you've got, I'm singing all these Christmas carols and a Hannukah song. Whereas to be truly inclusive, first of all, each culture or religion or ethnicity that's going to be represented should be represented in context with what's important for them. And anything you do that's supposed to involve everybody needs to either involve everybody equally or be non-denominational. So it's a really hard balance because you know, generally speaking, it's come at with the best of intentions. And I have had the experience of people choosing a Hanukkah song that is much more interesting and traditional and even in Hebrew rather than just singing I Have a Little Dreidel, which is an easy song to learn because it's very repetitive, it's funny, and it's in English. So that's always been nice when it's like, look, we're gonna sing something more interesting than I Have a Little Dreidel. Or when an effort is made to acknowledge holidays other than Hanukkah, that is very much appreciated as well. So I'm not here to tell people how they should celebrate. I'm just here to offer my perspective on what it feels like on this side of the Hanukkah and Christmas um, time of year. So I hope that was informative and that you enjoyed it and that you learned something. And if you did like this and would like to see more GeoJesser Explains, please let me know. And if there's a specific thing you'd like me to cover, you can make a suggestion. And also, if you have any questions about anything that I mentioned, and I know I wasn't super detailed about some of it, I was trying to keep this video shorter than it ended up being. Um, Feel free to ask me about it. I'm always happy to explain, or if I feel like I could do a follow-up video to explain something in more depth, I will be very happy to do that. Thank you so much for sticking with me. Please subscribe if you're not, hit that like button, and check out some of my other videos. Have a wonderful holiday season.